Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is meeting number 78 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Thursday, November 9th, 2017. I will remind all committee members and our guests with us and those in the audience that today we are televised, and so I would encourage you to mute your cell phones or other communication devices. Today we are studying Report 2, Custom Duties from the Spring 2017 Reports of the Auditor General of Canada. As our witnesses we have this morning, Mr. Michael from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Michael Ferguson, the Auditor General of Canada, Richard Domingue, Principal. I should also say, I know I'll embarrass him, but Mr. Domingue is retiring in a few weeks, and this will be his last visit to committee. Mr. Domingue started his career at the Library of Parliament in 1988 as an analyst on the House of Commons Finance Committee. He has also worked as an analyst on the Public Accounts Committee in the early 90s. And in 1999, he joined the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. Mr. Domingue's audits touched mostly financial and economic areas such as long-term fiscal sustainability and public sector pension plans. He's appeared more than 20 times before various House of Commons and Senate committees over the years, including a dozen times before this PAC committee. So thank you for being here today, and we wish you all the best as you go, but we're looking forward to should you have comments today. Also, we have from Canada Border Service Agency, Mr. John Nosowski, President, and Martin Boldu, Vice President, Programs Branch. Oh, I'm sorry. Brad Loynashan. All right. From the Department of Finance, Mr. Rick Stewart, Assistant Deputy Minister, International Trade and Finance Branch, and Scott Winter, Chief International Trade Policy Division, Trade and Tariff Policy, International Trade and Finance Branch. And then from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mr. Steve Verheul, Assistant Deputy Minister, Trade Policy and Negotiations. And so we have a number of opening statements, so for that reason we want to begin right away, and we'll first turn to our Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our Spring 2017 report on customs duties. Our audit focused on whether the Department of Finance Canada, Global Affairs Canada, and the Canada Border Services Agency carried out their roles and responsibilities in managing customs duties on the many goods imported into Canada each year. In the 2015-16 fiscal year, federal government revenue from those duties was more than $5 billion. Many tariff items raised little revenue. For example, in 2015, 1,973 tariff items generated only $26 million. That is less than 0.5% of duty revenues. In addition, 57% of customs duty revenues were generated by only 3 categories of goods: apparel, footwear, and vehicles and auto parts.
We found that Canada Border Services Agency was unable to assess all customs duties owed to the government because its import controls were not working adequately. The import forms, filled out by importers and customs brokers, were not always useful to the agency. For example, the quality of the product descriptions entered on the forms were generally poor. Almost 75% of the records we examined did not have descriptions that allowed us to determine whether the importers used the correct tariff classifications. Therefore, we questioned why the agency required the importers to provide product descriptions. To expedite trade, the agency did not compare the goods with the information on the import form or on the invoice at the border. Goods were released at the border for delivery to their destinations. Within 5 days after the release, the agency confirmed the amount of duties and taxes owed. We believe this assessment system with little validation allowed some importers to be non-compliant with import rules and regulations. Importers are responsible for ensuring that the information provided is accurate, but they often use customs brokers to help them prepare import forms. We found that despite known non-compliance with import rules, the agency did not monitor the performance of customs brokers. The agency has the power to suspend or cancel a broker's license. However, it rarely suspended a license because of concerns about a broker's overall performance.
Agency and Global Affairs Canada didn't work together to adequately manage the limits on quota-controlled goods coming into Canada for the 5 imported goods we examined: dairy, chicken, turkey, egg products, and beef. The first 4 of these goods are covered under the supply management system. Canada applies tariff rate quotas to control the volume of these goods, which can be imported into Canada at a lower rate of duty or duty-free. Once that volume has been imported, duties are applied at a higher rate. In the audit, we noted a discrepancy between the volume authorized by Global Affairs Canada and the volume declared to the Canada Border Service Agency as eligible for a lower rate of duty. We observed that a significant volume of controlled goods entered Canada without the required permit. We estimated that in 2015, $131 million worth of dairy, chicken, turkey, egg products, and beef were imported without a permit. If the appropriate duties had been applied to the excess volume, the government would have assessed $168 million in additional customs duties. We also found that the duties relief program administered by Canada Border Services Agency could not always prevent the diversion of goods into the Canadian economy. The program allows importers to import goods without paying duties as long as they are used to add value to goods that are later exported. In 2016, the agency completed 6 compliance verifications of high-risk importers under the Duties Relief Program and found that none of these importers complied with the program's requirements. The agency later suspended the licenses of these 6 importers. Enfin, nous avons examiné.
Finally, we examined the $20 minimum value to import goods duty-free by mail or courier. This amount has not changed since 1992, but the volume and total value of incoming parcels have increased significantly. The agency did not have the staff to inspect all incoming parcels, which meant that duties and taxes were not always assessed when they should have been. The agency determined that administering customs duties on goods imported through the Postal Service and valued at less than $200 resulted in a net cost to the government. Overall, the Government of Canada assesses customs duties and controls goods coming into the country according to methods that are complex and difficult to administer. This means that the program operates differently in practice than on paper.
Global Affairs Canada and the Department of Finance Canada have agreed to our recommendations. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
No. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. We'll now move to Mr. Osowski, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today along with my fellow witnesses. I am joined by Brad Loynihan, Director of Trade Policy within the CBCA's Trade and Anti-Dumping Programs Directorate, who I may turn to in responding to some of your questions.
I'd like to begin by saying that we agree with the 5 recommendations made to the CBSA by the Auditor General. In response, we have developed and started to implement a detailed action plan, and the plan reflects the essential role the agency has to maintain the integrity of our country's customs duties regime and the importance of this regime to Canada's competitiveness and prosperity.
That each of the departments here today play in the customs regime. As a way for the federal government to obtain revenue and protect certain sectors of the economy, this regime is intrinsically linked to the mandate of all three departments. First, Finance Canada is responsible for developing and implementing policies on trade and tariffs, including the customs tariff. It also provides analysis and advice on the government's international trade and finance policy agenda. As for the CBSA, our overall mandate is twofold. We secure the border while ensuring that goods and people cross the border as expeditiously as possible. Under our facilitation role, we are also responsible for assessing the duties and taxes owed to the Government of Canada. Increasingly, we do this job in a fast-paced, complex global trade environment, one characterized by a 30% increase in the number of individual importations since 2012. Maximizing the benefits of trade for Canadians and Canada's prosperity is central to the government's policy agenda, and the CBSA takes its role in supporting trade very seriously. Thirdly, Global Affairs Canada is responsible for controlling the import of goods for which Canada requires an import permit, such as beef, chicken, and dairy products. These goods are listed on the import control lists found in the Export and Import Permits Act. Pour revenir à l'AFC, je tiens...
Returning to the CBSA, I wish to stress our dual mandate. We prevent the entry of those travelers or goods posing potential threats to Canada. But we facilitate the free flow of legitimate cargo and people at the border.
Fees and taxes on goods coming across the border, totaling more than $71 million in duties and taxes per day. A large part of this comes from the importation of commercial goods, which is central to our discussion today. Assessing duties and taxes is a shared responsibility between importers and the CBSA. Let me be clear, our customs regime is grounded in voluntary compliance by the importers and risk management by the CBSA. Much like Canadians are expected to voluntarily declare and pay their taxes, the Customs Act places the onus on importers to self-assess and ultimately pay their trade-related duties and taxes. Importers or their brokers are expected to provide correct declarations to the CBSA, and the agency then risk assesses the declaration. For importers potentially posing a threat to Canada's security or safety, the agency examines the shipment to decide whether it should be released, refused entry, or confiscated. After the goods have been released, the agency confirms the duties and taxes owing and accepts the payment. The CBSA has the legislative right to conduct trade verifications to ensure compliance with all import requirements, including the proper assessment of duties and taxes and the issuance of applicable penalties. So while it's our job to protect the health, safety, and security of Canadians, we must do so in ways that facilitate legitimate trade across our borders to keep the economy moving. This is a process we seek to improve all the time, and that brings me to our response to the report's recommendations. Dans le rapport, le vérificateur général a constaté que l'agence...
In the report, the Auditor General found that the agency's controls on the imports of supply-managed goods were inadequate. We recognize the seriousness of this finding, given our country's strong commitment to the supply management system.
Fourth recommendation called on us to work with Global Affairs Canada to better enforce tariff rate quotas by reviewing the process of verifying permits. In response to this recommendation, the CBSA acted quickly to strengthen pre-existing compliance measures. Specifically, we have increased the number of trade compliance verifications targeting supply-managed goods, so that additional duties and taxes owing as a result of non-compliance will be assessed. Since April 2016, this change has yielded $72 million in additional revenues that would not have otherwise been assessed. We also moved to audit participants in our duties relief program, under which certain pre-authorized companies are allowed to import goods without paying customs duties at the time of importation on the condition that the goods are later exported. CBSA verifications are ongoing and have resulted in the suspension or revocation of 8 licenses since May 2016. Moving forward, we will continue on this track of increased verifications, making sure that the integrity of Canada's supply management regime is upheld through the proper assessment of duties and taxes and adherence to program conditions. We will also review how the CBSA validates that goods being imported respect permits issued by Global Affairs Canada. We will address any gaps in the process while exploring automated means to carry out these functions more efficiently. We will complete this review by September 2018. The Auditor General's fifth recommendation, also pertaining to controlling goods, called for making licenses under the Duties Relief Program renewable and requiring a financial deposit from importers proportional to the value of the duties at risk. In fulfilling the agency's commitment to strengthening compliance, as referred to in recommendations 4 and 5, we will, in consultation with Global Affairs and Finance, complete this work by March 2019. En ce qui a trait aux autres recommandations de vérificateur général, lesquelles portent.
Moving to the Auditor General's other recommendations related to the assessment of duties, we also take seriously the finding that misclassification of imported goods has taken place.
We will follow Recommendation 1, which calls for a review of our customs brokers regime, including consideration of a licensing process that requires periodic assessment of a broker's compliance record and shared liability between brokers and importers when it comes to compliance with certain requirements. This review will include consultations with impacted stakeholders, including custom brokers, and we will complete this review by September 2018. In response to Recommendation 2, our agency will review its penalties, aiming to create a more meaningful deterrent to those importers who do not comply with the law relating to import revenues or with the agency's trade programs. To do this, we will consider strengthening the rules around specific penalties, namely our Administrative Monetary Penalty System, or AMPS, as well as the rules, as well as the rules around seizures and qualifications for the CBSA's privilege programs, such as the Trusted Trader program. Again, consultation with our stakeholders will be an important component of the review. Finally, Mr. Chair, we also agree with Recommendation 3 to review the time period allowing for adjustments to be made to import declaration forms after the fact, without compromising our ability to conduct compliance verifications. To this end, in consultation with our stakeholders, our agency is conducting a review of the current legislative provisions that will be completed by December 2019. As always, we seek the optimal balance between the agency's ability to conduct meaningful compliance verifications and our responsibility to facilitate trade. In closing, let me say that again, we take this report's findings seriously and our actions speak to this. Let me also reiterate that trade facilitation is critical to Canada's prosperity, and our agency is committed to responding to the needs of the import and export communities to help enhance Canada's competitiveness. Je souhaite remercier le vérificateur général.
I'd like to thank the Auditor General for his report and recommendations. I'd also like to help us to make further improvements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osowski. And now we'll move to Mr. Stewart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, and good morning to you all. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Le sous-ministre des Finances regrette de ne pas être disponible.
Finance Minister apologizes that he is unable to attend today. I'll start by providing you a brief overview of the role of international trade and finance with respect to customs duties. And then I will say a few words about the Auditor General's findings and the actions that we are taking to address his recent recommendation to the Department to review Canada's tariff regime.
For Canadian import policy, including Canada's tariff regime, which is governed by the customs tariff and its underlying orders and regulations. The International Trade and Finance Branch provides analysis and advice on trade and tariff policy issues to support the Minister in this capacity. The branch also is involved in drafting related legislation, orders and regulations, and supporting their implementation. With respect to customs duty, our analysis and advice is guided by proactive tariff policy principles in support of important economic policy objectives. In recent years, this has included numerous measures to assist various economic sectors, support consumers, and ensure tariff programs for developing countries are aligned with global realities. These efforts are in addition to the many changes made to the legislation as a result of trade agreements and to simplify its structure and its administration. Sur la question de contestation de l'audit
regarding the customs duties audit finding, the Department of Finance was largely regarded as effectively fulfilling its responsibilities. The report concluded that when the department reviewed customs duties, whether it be in the context of FTA negotiations or in support of other government priorities, the analysis conducted was sound. Nevertheless, the report recommended that the department conduct a review of the customs tariffs to identify if there are any specific tariff items that no longer meet their policy objectives and that could possibly be modified.
Recommendation, the Department has agreed to undertake such a review, taking into account Canada's tariff policy objectives and international obligations, among other factors. In fact, in accordance with the timelines provided in our detailed action plan, this review is currently underway by my officials. Our objective for this review is to identify specific tariff items that could be modified, as well as other technical simplifications to the tariff structure that would help reduce red tape and ease administrative burden and compliance costs for businesses. Our aim is to provide recommendations to our Minister in the coming months and to implement any resulting changes by the end of 2018. Before I end, I would like to thank the Auditor General for the constructive feedback provided in the report, and we look forward to working ahead on our recommendation. Thank you all once again for your time, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we'll now turn to Mr. Verhoeven, please, from Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting us to appear today, and on behalf of Global Affairs Canada, I would like to thank the Auditor General for the work of his office on this important issue. We acknowledge the findings and recommendations of the report and look forward to discussing the steps taken to address some of its findings. First, I would like to provide some information on the role of Global Affairs Canada as it relates to the customs tariff. Global Affairs Canada is responsible for administration of import controls under the Export and Import Permits Act. It is the government authority for the review of and the issuance of permits regarding the import of products contained on the import control list. This list contains many different types of goods, including various agricultural products, textiles and apparel, certain steel products, and certain strategic and military goods. The majority of items contained on the import control list are identified by the customs tariff classification. Under certain bilateral and multilateral commitments, Canada has established tariff rate quotas for agricultural products, including supply managed goods, which allows for a certain predetermined volume of products to be imported at a low rate of duty. Importers wishing to claim the low rate of duty for these goods normally require a shipment specific permit issued under the Export and Import Permits Act. Imports of these goods without a shipment specific permit can normally only be facilitated at the higher rate of duty as identified in the customs tariff. There are certain exemptions for imports of goods for personal use. Global Affairs Canada has a close working relationship with the Canada Border Services Agency, which is responsible for the assessment of the goods imported into Canada and the enforcement of border controls. Import permits issued under the authority of the Export and Import Permits Act are shared electronically on a transaction-by-transaction basis with the Canada Border Services Agency in order to facilitate their administration of border controls and tariff classification of imported goods. This information process is facilitated via Global Affairs Canada's Export-Import Control System software and the Canada Border Service Agency's Accelerated Commercial Release Operations Support System. As such, ensuring that tariff rate quotas are respected and that supply managed goods entering Canada are properly assessed is a shared goal of both Global Affairs Canada and the Canada Border Services Agency. We take seriously the responsibility to administer the import control component of Canada's system of supply management. A key finding of the OAG report regarding the management of customs duties was that a certain volume of controlled goods subject to tariff rate quotas were imported into Canada at the low rate of duty without the required shipment-specific import permit, thereby negatively impacting the integrity of Canada's system of tariff rate quotas and duties payable to the Government of Canada. In order to address this finding, the OAG recommended Global Affairs Canada and the Canada Border Service Agency work collaboratively to better enforce tariff rate quotas. In response to the OAG findings and recommendations, the Department has instituted a process by which officials of the Canada Border Services Agency will receive regular breakdowns of all permits issued for agricultural goods subject to import controls under the Export and Import Permits Act. This will assist CBSA officials in their post-shipment verification activities and improve the effectiveness of the enforcement of tariff rate quotas. The information is being shared under established information sharing authorities. We believe that strong interdepartmental cooperation is one of the main strengths of Canada's import control program. I can assure you that Global Affairs Canada is fully committed to strengthening our efforts in this important area. We will be happy to respond to your questions on these or other matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Verheuvel. And we'll now move into our first round of questioning, and the first round goes to Mr. Lefebvre. Please, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start, I just want to ask, Chair, as you know, we have a pretty much a committee policy that we ask that we have deputy ministers join us at the meeting. So I would like to have your explanations as to why the Minister of Finance, Deputy Minister, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs is not here. I'd just like to have your explanation. Please, Mr. Chair.
I can maybe have Mr. Stewart answer. We were aware that he was unable to be here today. He was here in October 17th for the public accounts, and we're pleased with that. And I think we knew that he wasn't going to be able to attend. If Mr. Stewart wants to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess what I would add to that is certainly my Deputy Minister takes appearances at all committees seriously, and it is with regret that he was not able to be here today due to conflicting obligations.
All right. And with respect to the Global Affairs, the same answer?
Essentially the same answer, yes. Our Deputy Minister is currently in Da Nang at the APEC ministerial meetings with the Prime Minister and is unable to appear today.
Yes. Yeah, that's a strong answer. Okay. All right. I'm satisfied with that. If the rest of my community members are satisfied with that, to continue as to yes.
Very pleased that Mr. Verheuvel is here. I'm sure that we won't be disappointed. So.
Thank you. But with that,
and likewise for Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. With that, Mr. Chair, can I start my time, though?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. Merci beaucoup d'être ici ce matin. A few things before I start the questions. I just wanted some explanation as to Mr. Ozowski. When you say that the system that we have under the CBSA for importers is a voluntary compliance by importers and risk management, and the risk is managed by the CBSA. Much like the Canadians have a voluntary compliance, right? That we file our taxes, we got to put everything in there, and then if not, CRA comes back and they reassess you and to determine what you actually owe in taxes. However, we have a system to make sure that to verify that what's called a net worth assessment. So if you don't file any if you file zero on your taxes over the years, and basically CRA comes back and say, well, if you do a net worth assessment, we think that you're worth this, therefore you need to pay taxes at X amount. Is there a same system for importers? Because at the end of the day, if it's a voluntary compliance, if you're not, and from what we see here, it was pretty easy to, if you didn't really properly declare, there was not the checks and balances in place that were very strong to actually address that. So is there a parallel system that, because you're comparing it to a taxpayer compliance system, but is there a system that is similar for the importers?
Well, I guess we actually probably have a little bit better because you actually have to provide some documentation to us with every import, unlike the tax system where you potentially could not file for a particular, even though you're obliged to do, and then you could do some catch-ups. But the basics of it, though, is that you have to classify or look for what the appropriate classification is of what the importation is, and we look for that in every circumstance. Sometimes it's done electronically, sometimes it's done in a paper format. It depends on what the good is and the mode of how it's coming in.
And how often is that reviewed or audited? These basically, because obviously anybody could put whatever they want on the forms. There has to be checks and balances in place. What are the audit measures that?
So just to put it in context, we do 17 million commercial releases a year. So there's a lot of volume and complexity here that we're talking about. And that said, we do anywhere between 1,500 and 1,800 verifications a year. And I think really what the Auditor General has pointed out and we've responded to is that we're probably biased a little bit too much towards the random, and now we're doing more on the targeted side. And that's why I was able to report in my opening remarks about some of the increased assessment revenues that we've been able to collect.
Yes, that leads me to my next question with respect to supply management. We actually have a supply management system in place to protect Canadian producers and to ensure that there's not an increased volume that people could just skirt the system. But from what we've seen here, from the Auditor General's comments, that basically the system that we had was not, the checks and balances were not properly there, and that led to obviously these results that we're seeing that are very, very concerning. The fact that we actually legislated and have a system to protect our Canadian producers, but yet we rely on CBSA to ensure that that happens. But if it doesn't, the system is for nothing. So what do you say to that? Where are you guys with that recommendation?
I agree that we could have, and we are doing now a better job targeting this particular sector to make sure we understand the importance of it to the Canadian economy and to these producers.
So exactly what are you guys doing to address that? I know you talked about it a bit.
We're doing more targeted verifications.
On basically on imports of poultry, on
yes.
beef, and
absolutely.
And
so not only that, but also for the duties relief program, which is where you would get relief if the good was subsequently to be exported, and if it was not exported, then we would go back and reassess and collect the appropriate taxes.
Yeah, where my concern lies is in your comments at page 4, and you say, in response to this recommendation, the CBSA acted quickly to strengthen pre-existing compliance measures. So if they were pre-existing, and strengthen something that already exists. So I'm concerned that it wasn't properly done in the first place. You know, and so what did you do to strengthen that? Is just basically makes you more specific audits in
yes,
that?
As I mentioned, we changed our bias from random to more targeted and focused on that area of concern, which industry had expressed to us as well before the Auditor General. So it's about, I mean, honestly, what it's about for us every day is managing risk and how we apply the resources at the border to the risks that we're aware of. We rely on work like the Auditor General, consultations with stakeholders, intelligence with our partners to decide where we can focus our efforts. But we'll never be able to manage the risk down to zero.
I understand that. Now, you talked about the duties relief program, and in 2016, it says at paragraph 256 in the report, the agency completed 6 compliance verifications of duties relief program participants that import, supply, manage goods, and suspended the licenses of all 6 participants because they did not comply with these program requirements. That is extremely, extremely concerning. 6 out of 6 did not properly do this. So if we would have done 10 out of 10, or if we would have done 10 audits, would that have been a 10 out of 10? So that is extremely concerning that was the practice management before. It was would let these types of verifications or these types of imports not be properly verified, and these were actually people that qualified for the duties relief program. So what measures have you put in place to ensure that this is not happening again?
So we're working very closely with Global Affairs Canada on this. Ideally, what we would have, and in the future, we would look towards an automated system that would allow us to ping at the border to verify with the Global Affairs system that this license is actually in place and the goods are being imported properly and declared properly. We have an initiative called Single Window now, where we basically are trying to sort of be the publisher's clearinghouse between what importers are bringing into Canada and various government departments and agencies' requirements through that importation process. And so we've onboarded, I believe, 9 departments and many members of the import community to try and automate that process so that everybody has that back and forth and we get the real-time intelligence. So this is something that we would look to work with Global Affairs to onboard them into that initiative and automate that so that at the point in time, while the good is still at the border, so officers can inspect it and validate it, that I have that real-time intelligence with respect to the participants of the duty relief program.
Right.
5, and we'll now turn to Monsieur Deltel. Vous avez 7 minutes.
7 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the quality of your French. Welcome, sirs, to the House of Commons. I have 3 themes to discuss in this first round of questions. First, Mr. Osowski, I would like to know, generally, we've noticed an increase in the amount of work that your employees have to deal with, given the increase in the amount of trade. First, I'd like to know, generally, online market, what we buy online, that people can buy from home, and we obviously have to go through your agency and involve the work of your employees. Does this have a direct impact or a major increase, or does it is it somewhat marginal in relation to trade between various companies or factories and in major markets? Thank you for your question. I'd like to start by saying that the e-commerce concept is important for our agency.
300,000 postal and courier shipments per day coming into the country. I would encourage members, if they get the opportunity, and happy to facilitate a tour of one of our postal facilities where you can see the volumes. And what's particularly hard about this, particularly with the e-commerce aspect of it, is that we don't often get on the postal mode the advanced information and a clear description of what the good is to allow us to make the proper assessment. And that's particularly worrisome when it comes to the importation of synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, which is something that is of huge concern for us.
Such what?
Fentanyl, the synthetic opioids. Okay. It's a huge concern for us on a daily basis. It's something that we are working with my Border 5 colleagues. So the Border 5 is Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain. In fact, we just met in Sydney, Australia to talk about how we can sort of work more closely with the Postal Union and Canada Post to try and get better data in advance so that we can target, because with that volume, it's simply impossible to do and keep up with the risk that we're trying to mitigate. And it really relies more on data. Less so of a problem on the courier side because we do get good data analytics from companies like FedEx and UPS, so that allows us to target our efforts and manage the risk better. But on the mail side, from e-commerce, it's a huge problem.
So, and it's still growing, isn't it? The e-commerce still growing, isn't it?
It absolutely is growing in leaps and bounds. Absolutely.
Okay, so is that your main issue to address right now?
We're looking, Health Canada has a lead right now in an initiative with respect to the fentanyl crisis, and we're working with them to see how we can do it better, but it's a broad issue. As I mentioned, we're working with our colleagues to the south and our other counterparts in the Border 5 community.
How will you address the new challenge since July 1st, beginning of the July 1st in 2018 with the marijuana?
Sorry,
how will you address the marijuana issue?
Marijuana?
When it will be legal?
Well, so as you're aware, the government has tabled legislation on this, and we're preparing for our role in that. The importation and exportation of marijuana will still be illegal. There will be personal use issues. Our officers will be trained to do drug-impaired driving tests, as we do now for alcohol-impaired driving. But this will have a huge impact on us. But to be clear, the importation and exportation without proper permits in certain circumstances will be illegal and remain illegal.
But you talk about big issue for you?
I think it's an adjustment. Our officers will be well trained to manage this, but this will be a big change for Canada and for all departments and agencies, quite frankly.
And how do you intend to address it? Do you have some formation plan? Do you need to hire new people?
In terms of the work that we're going to be doing for cannabis, yes, there was a budget asked with respect to that, and we will be getting extra resources to deal with that.
Okay, let me get back to the e-commerce. So as you said, it's growing up, and it's a big issue for you. What is the percentage of the e-commerce compared to the, I would say, big business, you know, the transfer between big business, shop and plant and all of that. So do you consider, what is the percentage of e-business? 30%, 35% of your daily work?
I don't have the annual comparison. I have the annual for commercial. It's over 17 million releases a year. I know on the e-commerce, postal, and courier side, and I could get back to you with some more detailed numbers in terms of what we would call e-commerce, but as I mentioned, between postal, which is over 200,000 a day by itself. That's the majority of e-commerce stuff that I'm worried about, but it comes through the courier side too. It depends on how people choose to ship the goods that they buy, right? If you're willing to wait a long time, you can send it through the postal stream. If you're willing to pay for a little bit more and faster service, it comes through a courier stream.
Okay, I think that it's closed my intervention on e-commerce, but as you can see from your point of view, is that this is a big challenge for you in the next years the years to come, and I think that you and all the other departments, and especially Post Canada, should work hand in hand and having more close relation, just to be sure that because as this type of exchange is growing up, and as more people, more Canadians buy things by internet and from offshore, I think this is what you have to address with most important issue. This is the most important issue for you. So what is your plan about that to address it?
Well, we meet regularly with Canada Post to talk about, because obviously they're a critical partner for us in this. We work in their facilities, and we have been for many years. This is a new phenomena for us both in terms of the volumes and increases. And we've installed, in terms of the fentanyl piece, we've installed some detection equipment in these facilities so that officers can do the examinations in a safer method to protect themselves and their colleagues at Canada Post. But as I say, this is an evolving issue. We're all sort of dealing with it at the same time. Ultimately, we would like to see better data up front on everything that comes into Canada. But as I say, I'm happy to arrange a tour for you. You can see literally a conveyor belt and these large containers called monos filled with little puffy plastic envelopes that might have an iPhone case in it, it might have a battery, it might have 30 grams of fentanyl. 30 grams of fentanyl, 1 ounce, is 15,000 fatal doses. So, and it might not have any information on it of use for me to sort of target that. So this is a huge area of concern for us, and we're putting a lot of energy to work with Canada Post to sort of figure that out, and as well with the importers and the countries that this material is coming from.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. Christofferson, please. And again, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your attendance today. This is a really bad audit. Make no mistake. I mean, this was one of those where every page I went through, I got a little more angry and a little more angry. Let's start with that point. The focus of the audit on page 2.9, this audit focused on whether the Department of Finance Canada, Global Affairs Canada, and the Canada Border Services Agency adequately managed custom duties according to their roles and responsibilities. Conclusion, page 17, 2.86. We concluded, this is the Auditor General, we concluded that the Canada Border Services Agency could not ensure that all customs duty owed to the government were assessed. We also concluded that Global Affairs Canada and Canada Border Service agencies could not ensure that the tariff rate quotas were respected. The Canada Border Services Agency allowed some supply-managed goods to enter the Canadian market without the proper duties being paid. Furthermore, we concluded that the Department of Finance Canada suitably fulfilled its responsibilities in regard to custom duties, but needed to further review the relevance of tariff items to ensure that they met government objectives. I got to tell you, now I want to go back to page 7, 2.83. So I read that just to say that in terms of the oversight, you failed. The main audit was to go and look at what I described, and you failed abysmally. But one area I want to focus on, it's a shame this is one of those times when I wish we had 7 hours rather than 7 minutes, because I got to tell you, it's just unbelievable how bad you're conducting your business there. I want to focus on an area, and help me, Auditor General, understand how this works exactly. But apparently, when goods are brought in, there's a self-assessment done as to what's in there. And then, according to your report, there's like up to 4 years where the importer can go and adjust their paperwork. And apparently, that was done in the period of 2014-15. there were about 200,000 adjustments that resulted in $136 million in refunds. And not surprisingly, there were only 20,000 adjustments that resulted in payments of $55 million to the agency. And then the Auditor General concludes in 2.40, in our view, this situation allowed importers to circumvent paying required duties. So, Auditor General, help me make sure I've got all my facts straight. Would you, in your language, describe exactly what's going on that is problematic? Because as I understand it, because you don't, the self-assessment was done, the agency can't go back and determine years later whether or not the adjustment matches with what was there, because it's all being done by the same person. It's just, so Auditor General, if you would put that in a little more technical term for me, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, I think, you know, you've more or less, you know, in the question, you've more or less gone through the process, you know, and it's not in all cases, but in a number of cases, the importer has up to 4 years to change, you know, the original classification of the goods, and as you said, that happened 200,000 times for that, or in that 1 year. It resulted in refunds, and the difficulty is when somebody comes along 4 years later and says, well, what I told you I imported in the first place wasn't what I actually imported. I've imported something else. That's 4 years down the road. The goods are probably, in a lot of cases, they're already in the market. They've already been used. They may not even exist anymore. So, you know, the difficulty of the department being able to verify that. And even we noted in the report that the department itself, the agency itself, indicated that the longer the amount of time that passes before you know, somebody makes that adjustment, the more likely it is that perhaps the adjustment isn't totally you know, the right adjustment. I also, though, want to just point out that yes, it was $136 million worth of refunds. So the importer said, well, no, I didn't import what I told you I imported originally. I imported something else, and that something else has a lower duty on it, so you owe me some money back for what I paid. In the other case, yes, there were also instances where the importer came back later on and said, well, I imported something else and the duty is higher, so I owe the government money on that. Now, that may be, I guess, to be totally cynical, I suppose, which comes along with my job, I suppose, but that may be a case of an importer actually, you know, managing their float.
Planning it.
Right, so,
Yeah.
Paying a lower duty originally, and then, you know, yes, making the appropriate adjustment in 4 years' time, but in the meantime, you know, having the benefit of not having to pay the full amount of the duty up front. So, you know, you have to look at both of those and try and get down into the details to understand what's going on in both of those cases.
Thank you. So whoever feels the lead on this, but I'd like to hear, how did you get to the point where that's going on, and exactly what are you doing about it, and how long is it going to take?
Well, I'll jump in.
Please.
So yes, this was a specific recommendation in terms of the legislative provision. So this is a legislative provision. You have 4 years to make an adjustment. And we're working to understand what changes could be done to
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize for being so rude. Just let me ask you this. If I'm self-assessing and telling you what's in there,
yes,
and I can go back 4 years later, as the Auditor General just said, and you don't know what was in there in the first case, what's to stop me from having a side little business plan where my intention is to make sure I scoop back those millions of dollars deliberately? Like, just conceptually, how could this possibly work?
Well, if you were to come back, just to be clear, if you come back and it's not just you say, here, I think I miscalculated, send me a check, please. It is provide us the documentary evidence to do so. So we do a rigorous process. Absolutely, as the Auditor General has pointed out, there is misclassifications. It could turn out into money owed to us. It could turn out to be net zero. It could be a refund, as was
But only
pointed out.
1/10 of the time is it money back. Sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate the Auditor General's point on this one, and we are looking at the 4-year time frame to understand if, again, with the dual role that we have in terms of facilitation, how best to sort of manage that and come up with a proposal as per our response.
What would some of that be? No? Okay.
We'll now move to
Thank you.
Mr. Area, please, for 7 minutes.
Chair, there's so many things to ask. I don't know where to start. Let me start with this Auditor General's note that despite no non-compliance with import rules, the agency did not monitor the performance of customs brokers. It has rarely suspended a license because of concerns about brokers' overall performance. In your note, you say that brokers are expected to provide correct declarations to the CBSA, and the agency then assesses the declaration. You also said that to follow recommendation 1, that you will start consultation with impacted stakeholders, including custom brokers, and that review will be by September 2018. You also did mention that you have suspended the licenses of 8 importers in 2016. There seems to be a bit hesitancy on your part to take any action against the custom brokers who are non-compliant. What's your reaction?
Once again, we agree with the Auditor General's recommendations in this one. He made a couple of very important points, including, I think, the shared liability that customs brokers and importers could share in terms of the import requirements and paying duties and taxes. Right now, it's the importer's responsibility. So we're reviewing and have had some preliminary discussions with the Canadian Society of Custom Brokers to get a better appreciation of their views on licensing regime reform. Understanding they play a key role in the commercial importation process. As well, concurrently, we're in the procurement phase of a new assessment and revenue management.
Sorry to interrupt, I apologize. I got very limited time, but my comment still stands. There seems to be a bit hesitancy in taking any actions against the customs brokers. I will move to the other point. There are, to Mr. Stewart, there are 1,973 items that generated only $26 million. And then this import, what is this, up to $200 getting imported, the cost is enormous. Auditor General says that the goods imported through postal services and valued at less than $200 resulted in a net cost to the government. Are you contemplating any measures to change this or to address this?
If I understand your question, I think you've asked me 2 things.
Yeah.
One is the sheer number of tariff classifications that we have in the system, and the second relates to the de minimis threshold. Let me start quickly with the first one. As the committee may be aware, the tariff classification structure is established by the World Customs Organization, and it's designed to ensure that there is a commonly understood system, right?
Thank you. Can you address the second part, please?
So, with respect to de minimis, I'm not going to speak to the agency's administrative costs to assess de minimis packages. What I will say is that there are two dimensions to the considerations around what an appropriate de minimis threshold is. One is administrative efficiency and cost, but the second is the issue of tax fairness and the competitiveness of the Canadian industry.
Okay, I got it. So you are not immediately addressing that because I got very limited time. I have to go to 2 other things, especially with you. The Auditor General stated that the department refused to provide the OAG with the documents that contain particular analysis, especially, you quoted cabinet confidences, especially with this $20 minimum threshold. Is it something that is absolutely covered under the cabinet confidentiality as per the new order in council that was issued by our government?
The short answer is yes. The one document in question for our ministry was a document that was created before the date of the new access
And I would like the Auditor
date.
General to address this, please.
Thank you. Well, I think there's not much more I can say other than we asked for the information. The information was an analysis that was done, under the previous government. It isn't covered by the most current order in council. So to this date, Finance refused to give us that analysis, and we still don't have it.
I think, Chair, we should look at this at a later date. Thank you.
We'll have 2 minutes.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
For someone who's
That's an advantage. Then, Mr. Stewart, I would like to go back to recommendation 2.63. Can you assure that you are not going to stop agency from implementing that recommendation 2.63? If you want, I can just read, that's the duties relief program, where, considering making licenses renewable conditional upon importer's compliance record on requiring financial deposit.
What I can say in that is we work very closely with CBSA on an ongoing basis on all of these issues, and we will work constructively with the agency.
So you accept this recommendation?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us, there was another thing on the agriculture which my friend is going to address to Mr. Osowiecki. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. I apologize. The recommendation 2.35 regarding penalties on non-compliant importers, the average penalty was found to be $151, whereas the penalty for first offenses was $150. I don't understand how it can be so close to the first offense penalty. So how can we explain that?
So, first of all, we accept the Auditor General's recommendations on this, and we will review the all trade-related administrative monetary penalties. I think there is opportunity to adjust this. Again, this is a voluntary compliance regime, and we're trying to do corrective measures. I agree that the numbers probably need to be looked at in terms of what is a meaningful deterrent.
Thank you. And
Mr. Area, I will rule that your time is up. I will now go to Mr. Nuttall, please, for 5 minutes on the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the committee, members of the government for joining the committee today. I just wanted to pick up where Mr. Christopherson had left it, and it's actually quite surprising that it is so easy to skirt the system in terms of bringing commercial goods in the country, and the duties that are payable. My own experience crossing the border at Niagara with backpacks for kids in government housing is that it is actually very difficult to bring goods in. I've been charged commercial, I've been charged personal duties, sometimes no duties based on the agent or whatever it's at the border. To realize that there's people going by with goods in their trucks that are eventually later going to be changed so that they can skirt the amount of dollars that they need to pay up front has really two effects. The first one is that the Government of Canada could potentially become the largest funder of some of these businesses. Essentially, we're banking American or other businesses and helping them compete with Canadian businesses, which is the second outcome. Now, you have to balance both the speed in which things can get across the border to ensure that it is a process that isn't too onerous and actually dissuades trade, with protecting the interests of our border, of our country, of our business. How do you foresee changing this system to balance that? Because the honor system apparently isn't working in many cases.
Well, I would say overall, understanding the complexity that my officers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, we administer 90 pieces of legislation at the border, 17 million commercial releases. And I think, by and large, $30 billion in duties and taxes reflects the job that they do very well. Is there leakage? Yes. Is it as cynical as the Auditor General said? Potentially. But for me, quite frankly, it is about using the resources that I've got and applying them to where the risks are. And if I have intelligence or if I have systems or information from partners about where I can better focus my efforts, I will do that. But it will never be reduced to zero.
Understood. My background is banking. I had write-offs every single year that I had to across the board take care of. I know it's going to be there. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm going to have write-offs. The same should be the case with CBSA. The same should be the case, quite frankly, with all of our departments. So, what is your estimation then of what's missing? Is it in terms of percentages, in terms of global dollars? Do you have that type of information? Is it measured? Because without measurements in place, you're never going to be able to wean down and be able to reduce those numbers.
I think in order to come up with an estimate, a global estimate of what might be missed, I think we'd have to do probably an unaffordable amount of random verifications to sort of get a data set big enough to actually give us a sense of that. And as I've explained right now, because of the recommendations that the Auditor General has pointed out on the supply and managed side, we have moved from the bias more towards the targeted because of these specific issues. So in a perfect world, I would have sufficient resources to do sufficient random as well to give you that sense, but I don't know I have those.
One other question on this, and then hopefully I'll have time for another question. If a company today were to bring goods into the country and either accidentally or on purpose put the wrong product or whatnot inside the vehicle and the tariff regime changes, let's say with a trade agreement that's going to go in a different direction, and 3 years from now they come back and they say, actually the goods were X or Y instead of A or B. Which tariff regime would they be responsible for paying under? Would it be the current one that exists today, or would it be one that potentially could change down the road?
It would be under the point of time of the transaction that took place.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if they decided to change it 3 years down the road, there's no penalty in saying, okay, well now the tariff's 3 times the okay. Thank you.
We will come back. We have 2 hours today, so we'll be able to come back. Mr. Massé.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, like my colleagues, I was really surprised by the Auditor General's report. I didn't spend a good evening looking at it, and I hate to say this in a committee, but I'm really pissed off. I'm pissed off because 2 years ago, there were farmers who protested, 200 farmers who protested in my region, and these people were crying almost, and who said to me, Mr. Massé, we don't understand what's going on. We're paying because there's dairy products that are going over the border that shouldn't be. No, this can't be true, I told them. The government is doing everything it can to make sure that we have good border control. And I defended this position for weeks and months. And now I realize, when I read this report from the Auditor General, that, I can't remember what page, I'll just state it like this, we noted that a large quantity of merchandise without duty entered Canada without the necessary permits. And in 2015, dairy products, dairy, turkey, eggs, worth $130 million was imported without a license. This is shocking. It is shocking because I was a public servant for 17 years. I was in charge of operations and programs, and it was my responsibility to make sure that the programs that I managed and the services that I was in charge of respected the framework that was in place. And I have to say that I don't even know what to say. Mr. Osowski, what can you say this morning to these farmers who perhaps are now realizing that they were right to be protesting. What can you tell these farmers this morning, sir?
And I don't know if, I'm not sure where Mr. Verhoeven would fit in on this as well. Some of the items that you're referring to, maybe give us a little explanation of some of the items that would be involved here. It's not, for example, if we're talking cheese, it's not just blocks of cheese, and I'll give you extra time here because I'm going on this, but I think we need to understand a little better about how this type of product comes across. It doesn't come across as cheese. It may come across as a pizza additive on the top where there's a cheese makeup in it. If that's my understanding, if I'm wrong, correct me.
So, merci pour la question. As I said,
Thank you for your question.
Opening remarks, we take the recommendations and findings of the Auditor General seriously. We understand the importance of the supply managed sector. We've done more in terms of our targeting efforts as a result of this, and as I've mentioned in terms of some of the changes that we've made to move more towards targeting. Milk is a particularly sensitive issue, and particularly milk proteins, and we're looking to do more sampling because essentially, and Brad maybe can help me here, but the customs tariff in terms of dye-filtered milk and milk proteins that may be used in cheese or cheese products, industry recognizes, as we do, that it's around 85% protein content that needs to be in there. And so we need to do sampling of this material and do the appropriate duty adjustment if it doesn't meet that threshold. So this is another area where we're doing more efforts, and we accept the Auditor General's recommendations, and we will do the best we can.
J'ai de la difficulté à comprendre.
Having a hard time understanding why do we need a report like this one for your agency to take corrective measures that are necessary? Why are you reacting downstream when I know that within your department you have very competent people who are dedicated, people who want to make sure that they're respecting the mandate they have? But once again, I have to tell you, I'm very shaken up. Once again, it takes an AG's report for you to act. And all his staff, it needs such a report that we have to, for us to be sure that what's going on and that you're going to take corrective action. So I'd like to, Mr. Osowski, hear what you have to say about the measures that you have taken and that you will take to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. And that for 2 years, or in 3 years or 2 years, that when we do other audits, that we won't be back here again in the same situation, but in another area. Mr. Osowski?
The comments on the professionalism of our officers who do care about this, and we do as well. This is not something that we're just reacting to as a result of the Auditor General's report. We've been dealing with the importation of milk issue for years and years. This has provided some more evidence that we need to enhance our focus on it, particularly with respect to the recommendations the Auditor General's made. We have a management response plan in place, and we are adjusting. We do the best we can to manage the risk and complexity every single day. As I mentioned, there's 17 million releases. Order volumes are increasing in every mode, and we are trying to manage the risk with the resources that we have available to us. I mentioned partly to the other member's question with respect to our assessment revenue management system that will help us with respect to how we interact with importers and manage this. This is in the procurement stage, and I hope to be in a position to in the coming years to do a much better job than this.
And we'll now move to Mr. Nuttall.
Thank you. And if I could, Mr. Chair, follow up where I left off. The United States, do they offer some of the same information the Auditor General's been able to bring forth in light of his audit in terms of trade going across the border where Canadian companies either mislabeled or later changed their the determination of what was in the trucks?
I'm sure they do, but I don't know the specifics of their particular program.
Mr. Auditor General, were you able to do any, or have you seen any statistics from our friends south of the border to see whether this is out of line with what?
We didn't look at what was going on in the U.S. We just looked at what was happening at the Canadian coming across into Canada.
Thank you. I think it would be it'd be interesting to understand if this is how far outside of the norm this is. In terms of, I would guess that somebody at the table would know what the policy is when Canadian companies are transporting goods to the United States. So they have the same sort of freedoms where there's a 4-year period where they can change what was on board.
I have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said at one point that it was unaffordable to go after the relatively small amount of issues that equates into just over $100 million. Couple of things. I think first of all that's with all due respect to the Auditor General, I think that the resources they have to actually check every single item would be similar to the difficulty of what you're saying in terms of being unaffordable. So I think that it's probably the tip of the iceberg. At what point is it to you? At what point do you say we need to do this in order to enforce the border, in order to send a message and maintain the credibility of the border?
Well, I think we would work closely with our colleagues at Finance and Global Affairs in terms of understanding where they think we need to shift our efforts based on sort of the broader sort of policy program framework. We do our best to enforce the laws that are in place at the time of the importation. But as I said, I'm managing risk, and I don't think you'd want me to stop every single shipment at the border. So we're always doing that very delicate balancing of risk and facilitation. And we're willing to take feedback and adjust accordingly.
Have you ever put a work plan together to try to deal with this issue?
We have a management response plan for all of the recommendations here in the auditor's report.
And the cost that makes it unaffordable, do you know what that is?
In terms of the true breadth of me stopping everything? My hypothesis is that you don't want me to come up with that number.
Right, I understand you're not looking to stop everything, but in terms of perhaps cracking down on those ones that are most prevalent in the Auditor General's report, targeting those, as I heard said a few times, targeting those players that may be purposely doing this?
Well, the Auditor General identified about $168 million in leakage. On the chicken side, we've recovered and assessed $72 million, and on the duty relief, $38 million. So we're making very good progress, and other verifications are still underway.
And do we charge an interest charge on top of the?
Yeah.
What is the interest charge?
Brad, you know?
So depending on when payment is made, once the importers have been notified of noncompliance and revenue owing, it will either be a prescribed or specified rate. And that obviously, shifts with government rate. Usually the specified is 6% greater than the prescribed lower rate. That it doesn't have to do with noncompliance. It has to do with when the payment is made once the importer is notified that they have an outstanding debt.
So if I have no outstanding debt as of today in chicken, what would my rate be that you're charging me as of tomorrow, keeping in mind that
whatever the Government of Canada or Bank of Canada prescribed rate would be at the time that you're notified.
Plus 6.
Plus 6 only in instances where, in fact, you haven't made payment.
One follow-up. So just to be clear, so the Bank of Canada prescribed rate is what we're charging, except in some instances.
Correct.
So possibly 1%, possibly 1.5% when their banks and our banks charge far more. No wonder they're doing it. Increase your interest rates, you'll fix the problem.
Thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Chen, not Ms. Okay. Mr. Chen, please. Switching on the go. Good deal.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this report, and I have many concerns, as some of my colleagues have already expressed. One of them is the fact that 20% of goods crossing into the Canadian border are misclassified. $136 million in one fiscal year refunded to importers due to retroactive changes. And to me, I am looking at the fact that when there is a non-compliant importer, the penalties are so low. So $150 for the first offense, $225 for the second offense, and $450 for the third and subsequent offenses. To me, there seems to be a better incentive for importers to potentially misclassify items once they cross the border and Canada Border Service Agency has not inspected them. They can come back 4 years later, and in the absence of government documentation, we are then relying on the importer's documentation, and then we are paying out in one fiscal year $136 million. So I know the agency is looking at reviewing the penalty, but what we need to really strengthen the fact that we need to deter people from making these types of misclassifications. When it comes to the penalties, what progress has the agency made in terms of where that will land?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as I mentioned, no refund is given without documentary evidence, and it's not just the importer's documentary evidence. We would swim upstream to the supplier side and actually validate what was being imported. Just to be clear, it's not just you make a request and you come in and change things and get a refund check. We actually do the due diligence to validate that refund.
So can you give me an example? You're saying you would go verify with the supplier. So if the supplier is 5,000 kilometers away, what type of communication or evidence would you seek from them?
Well, we would do a verification of the books and records. So, for example, the $72 million that I referred to on the chicken re-verifications audit assessments that we've done, those were books and records verifications, and that resulted in $72 million of revenue to the Crown.
Okay, so you're still relying on documentation from third parties, right, in terms of their...
Well, from the company and from the supplier to validate.
Okay. Going on to another issue, this goes on what Chandra, my colleague, was referring to in terms of the disagreement. There was a very clear disagreement. On page 17, the Auditor General reports that the agency says that administering duties on items valued less than 200 would result in a net cost to the Canadian government, whereas the Department of Finance then says that increasing the threshold to $200 would have cost the federal government $66 million. So this is perplexing because this is a pretty huge gap. We're, on the one hand, we have finance saying if the threshold is increased to 200, it will be a net cost, and on the other hand, the agency saying that that's not the case. So I know that the Auditor General has pointed out here that the explanation given was that it's a cabinet confidence. I would like to know from the folks at finance, in what ways did you calculate this amount differently than the agency did?
I believe the agency has never indicated that there wouldn't be a revenue loss from raising the de minimis threshold rate. Our estimate, the $66 million estimate, is the amount of tariff revenue that would be collected on products coming into the country valued at between $20 and $200 that we would no longer be collecting. So it's a foregone revenue collection of both customs duties and sales tax. And in addition to the federal costs, there are also provincial sales tax revenues that would not be collected if we waived the collection of tax up to $200 from the current 20.
Okay, so you're saying that the revenues, the foregone revenues, would total $66 million. And we all know in order to generate revenue, you need to have resources and expenses. And so I'm not clear, I'm still not clear, because it says here that from the Auditor General, and this is on page 17 of the AG's report, 2.85, the Department of Finance Canada informed us that in its analysis, it also considered the CBSA's administrative cost for collecting revenues and its enforcement capacity. So what you just said doesn't jive with what's here on the AG's report. Can you explain?
I think what I'm saying is that we indeed consider administrative costs of administering tax collection. But what I mentioned earlier in response to another member is that administrative cost effectiveness is only one consideration in determining what an appropriate tax level ought to be. There are issues of equity and fairness to the Canadian producers and Canadian retailers, and that tax fairness consideration is an important element that goes into the determination of what an appropriate customs duty de minimis threshold should be. It's more than just about administrative cost.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question, a follow-up. In a question my colleague, Mr. Chen, asked about whether or not you do documentation when you go upstream suppliers. Do you have the legal right to demand documentation?
It's voluntary. It's voluntary.
With foreign suppliers.
With foreign suppliers, it's voluntary.
Foreign suppliers, it would be domestic?
Domestic would be required.
Sorry?
Required.
You have the legal right to demand it?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. I want to come back to an issue that I have of limited time, but given how vast the problems are, because this really, it just, you heard all my colleagues, everybody doesn't know really where to start. It's so bad. But I want to turn, before I go to another issue I want to raise, in case we sort of missed the trees here, I want to ask the Auditor General, of all the findings we've had and the discussions we've had here this morning, are there any priorities that we haven't yet touched on that you'd like to make sure that we spend at least a moment focusing on? Because sometimes we can get sidetracked on issues.
Well, I think the thing that I would mention, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, the gaps that we found in the enforcement of the rules and, you know, the things that can be done on the supply managed and duties relief. And we've heard from CBSA, you know, what the types of steps they're taking on that. But I think sort of the bigger picture on this, again, is needing to stand back and say, is this whole system actually enforceable? Okay, particularly I'm thinking of, you know, again, the packages coming in through the mail. So it's great to have a system that says we charge duty on anything over $20, but if that can't be done, if the resources aren't there, if the effort to actually do that, you know, is such that not every parcel over $20 that should be charged duty is going to be charged duty, then, you know, the Canadian businesses are going to say, well, wait a minute, this isn't the system that we thought we were operating under. Things are coming in worth $100 or $200, and it's not always being charged duty, and that's not the system that we thought we were working under, right? So, and there's really very little that CBSA can do in that case, you know, because they're, I think in some of this, they're being asked to perhaps enforce a system that I don't know whether they can actually enforce. The problems we found on the supply managed and the duty relief and those types of things, I think those are things that they can fix. I think we've heard today that they are, you know, in the process of trying to fix those. But I think there are other parts of this system where I think there has to be a real consideration of whether the system can actually be enforced as it is written on paper. And what good is it to have a system where Canadian businesses think there is one system that is going to be enforced, but then in actual fact, in some cases, that can't be enforced that way.
Your time is up, but I just want to go from there. I think sometimes we put a lot of question to the department, and even back to our Auditor General, is this some that really should be pointed towards us as legislators, where you know they've been given this system. It's to comply 100% is virtually impossible, and so you've got that. But then the political consideration of consumer on this side who are shopping e-commerce, and then our industry or our retailers, they're setting up businesses and trying to succeed here. We have that to consider as well. So I guess how much of this would actually fall into the lap of the legislators or Parliament itself?
Well, again, I think there is always a balance in every system, you know, so Parliament has to establish the requirements. What is it that Parliament wants to be controlled at the border? What is it that, you know, those measures are? Once those measures are established, there has to be a way of making sure that the organizations that are having to enforce it have the resources to enforce it. I don't know how many resources it would take CBSA or Canada Post or whomever to be able to make sure that there is a reasonable assurance that, you know, it's never going to be perfect, but there's a reasonable assurance that most packages coming across the border through the mail, for example, if they're over $20 and should be charged duty, are in fact being charged duty. So, you know, in establishing the system, there also needs to be the appropriate consideration of the resource side of actually enforcing that system. And I think in some of this, my opinion is that there perhaps has been a bit of an unbalance in that. Again, that's not on things like the supply managed, you know, and checking the volumes, because that was something that, you know, we felt that they could actually do and they could improve on, and I think that we've heard today that they've made some improvements in that. But in terms of some of the other aspects of the system, and I particularly think of the de minimis, you know, I think there needs to be a consideration of it's not good enough to say this is going to be the system if that system can't actually be enforced.
Thank you. We'll go now to Ms. Shanahan, please.
Very much, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses here today. Again, a very informative report that we had this morning, and I'm just thinking back to my MBA case competition days, and this would be one heck of a juicy case for really fresh eyes and thinking on what is, as the Auditor General has referred to, a whole new, we're confronting a whole new way of doing business, a new economy, in other words. And so many of the issues that we're talking about here this morning have to do with culture, indeed, and how the business culture is changing, the import-export, our relationships, in an economy which is at la fois a virtual economy, but which also requires a physical on-site actual verification. So just to put it on the record, my riding of Chateauguay-Lacolle has, I believe, one of the busiest border crossings. Am I correct? Is it with Windsor? Is that Mr. Zasławski?
It's definitely in the top 10. I don't know exactly where it ranks in terms of commercial volumes, but it's definitely high.
Yeah, and certainly we've had some action there in recent months of a different nature. But one thing that when I'm speaking to my citizens, they know what's going on at the border, either because a lot of them work there or they have families. So a Bélanger on our side is a Belanger on the other side, and they know what's going on. So the diafiltered milk thing, that was definitely something that my folks knew about and they reported. Do you have a tip line when you say you heard from industry? You know, how long does it take for information to filter from the ground to action at the agency?
Well, we absolutely have a tip line. Absolutely, we consult with industry regularly and have very open channels of communication. And we do everything we can to sort of shift our efforts to make sure that we're dealing with the risks as we're made aware of them.
Okay, and I do appreciate, and I think we heard that in Mr. Verhaus, where are you, at your testimony, that there is a news story here, and that is the sharing now of information between agricultural, the Department of Agriculture and CBSA. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, certainly. We require individual permits for any imports of any of the supply managed products, and so given that we do that on a separate track, we have now been providing regular information to CBSA to allow them to make sure that they can track that at the border to ensure that those products coming across do have a valid import permit in order to be imported into Canada.
And that has resulted in a net positive benefit to the Crown?
Well, we only put this most recent process in place in September, so we're still waiting to assess the results, but we certainly have that expectation.
Okay. And then on to just, the challenge at hand that the Auditor General brought up of really what is the modernization of this system. Can we talk a little bit then about the Trusted Trader program? Because certainly my producers, and we're one of the biggest vegetable producers in Quebec in my riding, and that business is going very well. But there was a problem early in our mandate which had to do with a very outdated kind of certification, paper-based certification process, which fortunately we were able to resolve in a timely manner. But it just brought to light that there were processes in place that really were out of date. Who can speak to that, Mr. Osowski?
So we do have a Trusted Trader program, and we have other tools available to us in terms of what's actually on the manifest of the vehicle. And in the future, probably not too far down the road, you could see a case where, so for example, I'll take Windsor, where an auto part, I understand, could cross the border 7 times during the production of a vehicle.
Yeah, but how can we incentivize, because my understanding is that there's software involved. We heard this in OGO, in the Government Operations Committee at one point. Yep. There's software involved, and it's still bulky, it's still unworkable, and there's still these paper-based processes. So how can we move this process along in a more speedy fashion?
Well, I think that you raise a good point that when we put in our requirements, we have to make sure that we consult with industry and don't put in a system that's overly complex so that they can actually build the systems to interface with us properly. As you're aware, some of these businesses might be running their whole operations off their iPad, right? So we can't necessarily, there's very different levels of complexity in who we're working with in the stakeholder community. So we actually consult with them as we develop these systems and processes to make sure that there's not an unfair burden on the small versus the large. But it is a complex ecosystem that we're talking about here. Okay, and so we do our best to work with them as we make these changes.
Excellent. So we need to modernize on the technical side, but also people on the ground, eyes and ears on the ground is very important. Auditor General, you make a point about I'd like to ask you recommendation 2.41 regarding the 4-year period that the importers can make changes. Apparently in the action plan, we have that this will be completed by December 2019. Why would it take 30 months to comply with this recommendation?
So again, this is about the 4-year period, and I think that this is something that would require some sort of a legislative change probably, and that type of a process requires consultation and those types of things. So I don't know what the exact period of time would be, but certainly there would be a number of steps like consultation that would be involved in making that type of a change.
Shanahan. We'll now move to Monsieur Deltel, please.
Chair, I just want to get back to the point that I raised a few moments ago about the e-commerce, and there is a new rising up area, and also what Mr. Chen said a few minutes ago about le seuil minimal qui est à $20.
De minimis threshold at $20 you mentioned. As you mentioned, there are two kind of opposing elements here. You have the importer confirming one thing and then, the finance saying something else. Well, I'll ask the referee here to step in. Mr. Ferguson, what do you think about that?
So it's not really a disagreement. It's a matter of two different parts of the calculation. So what finance has calculated here, what we're saying is finance calculated the loss of revenue, which was $66 million. But what they didn't include was there would be less administrative cost incurred without, or they didn't give us the information about, how much administrative cost savings there would be. So they only, finance only, in what they gave us, they only provided us how much would the revenue go down. They didn't provide us how much administrative costs would go down. All we had were some other analysis that CBSA had done before that had shown that, for example, at $100, it costs them more to administer a $100 level than they actually collect. So the reason that it looks like it's two different calculations is because when we asked finance to provide us the information about, how much the reduction was, and I think, again, we've heard today that they did that type of a calculation, they didn't provide us that information on the reduction of the administrative cost. They just provided us the information on the reduction of the revenue.
Okay, but the issue is the same. I mean, do we have to raise the seuil minimal? You think that we should raise it?
C'est la chose que nous avons identifiée.
This is something we identified. Perhaps the finance department should consider increasing it to a reasonable level, and we have to look at all the aspects of the problem at the revenue level as well as the administrative costs. And as we also mentioned today, there are other considerations as well, such as the impact on imports. So it's not up to me to say whether the right thing to do is to change this threshold, but it is important for the Department of Finance to conduct all the necessary analyses in this field. We weren't able to access all the information that was available, all the analyses that were done in the past. We didn't have them. As Mr. Osowski said earlier, e-commerce is expanding, and nothing is going to stop this expansion, clearly. Perhaps we'll reach a ceiling at some point, but this is still far off in the future. So I can't imagine, well, in the meantime, and now we really love all these technological advances, but and I understand you're somewhat, you have some reservations, but perhaps I should ask Mr. Osowski the question, and perhaps he could give me a more committed response, because I respect the reservation of Mr. Ferguson. But Mr. Osowski, do you think we should make more efforts and get more personnel to look at the question of the minimum threshold, because there's a constant rise in e-commerce?
Question for the Department of Finance. They established the policy. They would look at the historical nature of when it was established and look at the conditions now and decide if there's an adjustment that needs to be made. As I mentioned, the volumes are high, particularly on the postal side. They've grown considerably, and there's many risks in the postal mode, as I've mentioned, such as fentanyl that we're dealing with. So this is just one aspect of it, and it really is a policy issue that I'll defer to my colleague on.
Alors, Monsieur le Ministre.
Two quick. One, of course, we rely on CBSA to determine what their administrative cost is. But coming back to this question of what the right level of de minimis is, we regularly get representations from both importer groups who are seeking consideration of a higher threshold, but also domestic retailers, Retail Council of Canada, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, who have competitiveness and level playing field concerns. So this is not a new issue for us. And I think with respect to the committee, the framing that, Mr. Chair, you noted a few moments ago about this trade-off between the cost of administering a system and the inherent protections that a system offers in the interest of both consumers and domestic producers and retailers. That's a policy question that I'm not at liberty to discuss today, but essentially it boils down to a policy question. What is the value of a system that provides that flexibility to facilitate consumers' wishes for cheaper products, while still protecting a system that allows Canadian retailers and producers to be competitive and to be vibrant? And that's the essential policy question, and the price determines kind of that balance, or the price falls out of that balance.
Just let every member of Parliament know, regardless of what changes ever would be made, there would be thousands of letters on both sides of the issue coming into your offices, whether it's, like I remember, like one day there was like 10 shoe in my constituency, shoe retailers that called me about de minimis, and on the other hand you have the consumer, the customer, and they're getting used to shopping online. So this is a massive political consideration too. Business, small business, consumers. Mr. Ferguson. And then back to Mr. Deltel. I stole your time, so.
And again, I would just like to mention that we're not suggesting that the threshold needs to change, and we're not suggesting that it's not okay to have a system that costs money. Our issue is if there is a system on paper that says all things imported through the mail or by courier with a value of over $20, it should have a duty charged on it. If that is what the system is, then there need to be the resources in the system to make sure that that is in fact enforceable. So we're not trying to say where it should be or whether there should be a change or how you come out on the balance of that policy question. What we're saying is, and again, understanding that we know that you can never get to 100%, but there needs to be, I think, a much higher expectation that, in fact, yes, the system is being applied at the $20 level, whereas I think right now it's clear that the system is being applied at higher levels in some instances.
Did you your statements? You have 40 seconds.
It reminds me the good old spirit of too much taxation kills taxation. So I think we are on the same page there. And as the Deputy Minister said, this is a political issue. And unfortunately, I have no more time to say where we stand.
Mr. Christofferson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on that last one, if I understand again, the essence of this is that the government's saying on paper, by law, they should be doing the $20, but in reality, they're using another number because the $20 is impractical from their point of view?
So again, they are trying to enforce it to $20, but they can't enforce it to $20 all of the time.
So they don't have an informal system of using a larger dollar figure? They just fail at the 20 and that's it? Somebody?
I'm not aware that we have another number in play that we use as a benchmark. I think it's really a function of volume and complexity, and they do the best.
That would almost be better. I mean, as much as it's not 100% in terms of what we do, at least it would make more practical sense. Okay, but if I can, Chair, and I know we're down to limited times, I want to spend just a moment on an area that my friend Mr. Aria got us into, and that is the refusal of information again. And Mr. Stewart, you just started to give an indication that this information is not captured by the most recent order in Council. Again, back up. It's public already. People know that we've got a battle going on in terms of fuel subsidies, and the Auditor General still not able to get all the information. And I'm saying this publicly because that's out there. We're in camera now dealing with the Parliamentary Law Clerk and others as we go through the legality of that, because obviously it's a big issue when the Auditor General says, I'm entitled to this information, I would like it please, and the government says no. That's a problem. And there are piecemeal fixes, and I won't get into the complexities of it, but Mr. Stewart, you were about to say that the order in council that was issued recently to resolve the Auditor General's need for information back to when this government took power, but I think we're into another issue again where the information actually goes into a previous government, and that creates an artificial wall where the bureaucratic world says no, and that's kind of where the rub is. Your comments.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think you can appreciate that my obligation is to provide the Auditor General with documents that they're entitled to as dictated by orders in council and his act, and I'm obliged to respect the limits of those order in councils. Your broader question of whether that limit should be in a different date or exist at all, that's a question I'm not in a position to respond to directly. That's a question you'll have to direct to the Privy Council office.
Yeah, okay. So I was just making the case, Chair, that this is again, I've made the argument that the two outstanding issues that exist, the legal matters we have without divulging any confidences, but the two issues are the instant case of trying to get the information pre-215, that remains an outstanding issue, and then there's the overall issue that the Auditor General has been asking for years, which is a change in language so we don't get into this each time, because so far every time we've gotten into it, we've had a one-off resolve with an order in council, but it still leaves more questions because of the detailed nature of the order in council, naming certain documents, certain things, and so we still have an issue in Canada, as proud as we are of our auditing system, and we all crow about having clean audits and everything. Right now, we've got a serious issue where the Auditor General is asking for information that he deems is within his legal mandate, and we have the department saying they aren't going to give it. That's as far as I can go now, because we're in camera sort of arming ourselves with the legalities of all of this. But it is a big deal when the Auditor General, who is not looking for any cabinet secrecies, he doesn't want any of that, just wants numbers, he wants his analysis. So if you want a chance to say something, I'll let you have it, then I'm going to move on if I have time.
Thank you, sir. I would appreciate to add something, and if I may. The Auditor General was seeking information in order to determine, as we understood what they were seeking, to determine whether we turned our attention to the question of administrative costs as we considered the appropriate level for the de minimis threshold.
Right.
While we were not permitted to share a single document in question, what we were able to provide within the flexibilities that we have was a series of, in fact, email transactions between ourselves and the agency that indicated that there was an engagement and a dialogue back and forth with the agency that pertained to this question of administrative costs as we were looking at the issue. Now, it's not a perfect solution for what the Auditor General was looking for, but in our mind, it was an evidence track that at least that suggested that indeed we had turned our attention to the question. It did not provide information on what our judgment was out of it, but it at least in our mind demonstrated that we did turn our attention to it.
That's going to require, Chair, an opportunity for the AG to respond if he wishes, please.
Well, I think if our evidence on issues about whether departments are doing analysis is about whether there was email correspondence back and forth that talked about there being some analysis done, you know, that's not the depth of evidence, let's say, that we need to be able to conclude whether analysis was at an appropriate level. So, yes, and we said in the report that they indicated to us that they had done the analysis, which we wouldn't normally put in a report if that had just been a verbal, we did something. You know, we put that in the report because, yes, there was some evidence that there was information that existed, but, you know, at the end of the day, the point is still the point. We needed to see the actual analysis to be able to conclude on this.
Right, and this remains an ongoing issue with us, and I would say, Chair, until we resolve the issue of macro language, this Public Accounts Committee and going forward in the foreseeable future are going to continue to run into this rub. So I would hope that, well, anyway, that one is now with the fuel subsidies issue. We're still in crisis. Am I out of time now?
2 minutes ago.
Thank you, Chair.
To Mr. Stewart, can I just ask one question? Is it your deputy minister that would deem, or you, that would deem this is a cabinet confidence, or is that actually the Privy Council that would say, okay, this analysis, here's the line, the analysis, the numbers, the particular is the cabinet confidence?
It's a determination that we make in collaboration and consultation with Privy Council office.
Thank you. Now we will go to Monsieur Lefebvre, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few minutes. I just want to get some clarification. Mr. Chen raised the issue with respect to the penalties, and that in the Auditor General's report says that basically the average penalty was $151, which is identical to, or almost identical to the penalty of the first offense, which is $150. So I just want to know, are the vast majority of the penalties of these importers obviously first-time offenders? Like, and what is the percentage of who these penalties are applied to?
I would turn to my colleague on this one.
Yep.
So you are correct that in fact it's an escalating penalty regime.
Yep.
So in that regard, first infractions in some cases are warnings without a monetary assessment, and then it will build for repeat contraventions of the same nature.
All right. So two things though. I've asked what is the percentage of first-time offenders that this average goes to? Like how, and after that, does it stop at that point? Like obviously, if a first-time offender, is there a mechanism to follow if they are repeat offenders as well?
Certainly. It's an automated system within the CBSA.
Yep.
So for the same importer, for the same contravention, the system will automatically trigger for subsequent infractions the higher level penalty.
Okay. Now you talked about the warnings. So basically, you have a warning system before a penalty, correct?
In some instances, depending on the nature of the infraction, there may be a zero-rated penalty, or it might go right to a dollar or monetary assessment.
So a zero-rated penalty is a warning?
Yes.
Okay. So now, how many are you keeping data on, basically, on who is committing these, who are you warning? And then how many of these warnings are you issuing compared to, and what are the averages? I'm sure if I saw the numbers actually of how many penalties are actually assessed. Can you provide us with those numbers?
Sure. So in 16-17, the agency issued a total of 26,000 administrative monetary penalties, totaling $11.4 million worth of revenue. And on the trade-related, so those linking to revenue evasion, we issued 709 AMPs, totaling almost $1 million in assessments.
And now on the warnings, how many warnings did you do?
I don't have that breakdown, but we'd be happy to provide that.
Yeah, be interesting to see that, because as the essence, if we don't follow the first time or the warnings, and after that we say, well, we will penalize you, how do we know to make sure that we can properly capture the data?
So just to clarify, if in fact we issue a warning, it is in the system.
So you should have that data then?
So yes, I just don't happen to have it with me, but we would automatically, if there was a subsequent infraction, it would revert to a monetary assessment.
And I would assume, and this is my last question, that an importer that has been assessed a penalty is more scrutinized on a go-forward basis after that penalty?
So that, as all of you would be aware, the CBSA risks all goods entering Canada, and therefore compliance records are taken into consideration.
So these 6 importers that were fined, that used this duties relief program, that were obviously completely offside, how are they now treated as they import their goods? What has changed for them?
So essentially, the duties relief program, their non-compliance, they have either been suspended or revoked from the program, which means that they cannot import goods without those relieving provisions. They now import goods paying regular duties and taxes at points of entry, and if in fact they can demonstrate that those goods were further worked and exported, then they would in fact be eligible for the appropriate refunds or drawbacks.
And therefore they are further scrutinized than before?
Of course, and they've lost privileges in terms of this program.
Madam Shanahan wants to...
Madam Shanahan, all right.
Yeah,
quickly.
So I want to get back to the idea of do we know, really what is the volume of revenue the potential revenue that we're talking about? This is where I'm just getting, it just strikes me that this collection of tariffs and so on, it's revenue to the Crown. We'll miss some if we do increase the de minimis to 200, but we don't know how much it would cost us. On the other hand, to either enforce more or to enforce less. It seems to me that there's some big questions still out there, and I just would like to hear from finance, I guess, on that, and from the Canada Border Services, because this is really a business proposition. From finance?
Well, I think,
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, I'm going
sorry.
to defer
Yeah,
to my
mixed
colleague
up,
for
yeah.
this question, because in essence what you're asking is, within the existing threshold, what is the kind of the leakage rate of taxes that should be collected that aren't being collected? I'm not sure I'm in a position to be able to answer that. That is one factor that has to go into that kind of theoretic calculation.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think for us to really give an estimate of what that number is, we'd have to do a far greater quantity of randoms to sort of get a sense of what those verifications found, and then extrapolate from there about what the number might be. But
okay, so maybe just to get a little bit more granular, we know that compliance officers are able to collect a certain amount of tariffs. There's a calculation here that it is approximately 4 to 11 times their individual salaries. So what is your thinking around that? Adding more compliance officers, does that necessarily multiply? Is there an exponential effect there on the amount of tariffs that can be collected, or what is?
I could speculate, but I mean, I think in general, when you throw an auditor at a case, they always find something, and they take great pride in that. And I think depending on the particular mode, depending on the mode and the particular good in point, it could be a very high return on investment. But I would expect a return on investment that makes it worthwhile for the Department of Finance to consider funding us for more. But I mean, that's a choice that has to be made amongst all the other pressures that they have across the system. And
what's interesting, if I may, Chair, is just on the cultural side. When folks know that there's more checking and verification going on, that tends to promote better behavior. Would you agree? But if that's not being seen, then the incentive is there is to try your luck, as we've heard here today.
I would say no one likes to hear that they're being audited.
Yeah. or simply verified at the border. No, but let's
as good as
it
might be for you, like a trip to the dentist.
But just to let the auditor, but being verified at the border, just knowing that you're going to be that, 1 out of 3 will be verified. Then whoa, the other 2 are on their best behavior.
Absolutely, people pay attention. Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, it's this balance, because if there was a random every third person going through the border, there's going to be an extensive check. It's really great until you're that third person, and all of a sudden you're slowed down at the border. And the same with trade. So we have the balance. Mr. Nuttall, please, and you're probably going to have the final word. You only have a few minutes.
I have just one question of verification, then I'll share my time with Mr. Christofferson. To Finance Canada, what is the interest rate related to individuals not filing their taxes on time and paying the resulting penalties after a year?
I don't have that information with me. We'll follow up with you and get that information.
So, CRA, okay.
CRA question,
I believe it's 1% per month. Yet, we possibly have situations where there's foreign businesses paying 1% per year. That's an issue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nuttall. Mr. Christofferson, you're going to have the final minute.
And I'm just going to make a quick statement, if I may, Chair, and that is that in light of this issue, in light of colleagues like Mr. Massey and others who represent Canadians who are being let down by this system not working right. I would just say that this may be, and I'm only offering my opinion now, but this may be one of those times when we plan 18, 24 months from now that we want the department back in here to address these issues rather than waiting till the full audit is done, because this is just so important and so complex and a lot of promises made that we may indeed want to haul them all back here and see how we're doing 18 months from now. I just leave that there for us to consider. Thanks, Chair. Thanks to our guests for being here today.
We also do have action plans that have been submitted by the departments, and we do follow those up. And so I think what Mr. Christofferson says is correct. There can be callbacks, and even along the lines of the action plan, if we feel that some of those smaller targets aren't being met, then it may be sooner rather than rather than 24 months later. So we want to thank you for being here today. It's been a very interesting discussion, and we thank you for your attendance. I guess I usually put a little qualifier in if in the next few days where you feel like you could provide us more information on a certain question. There were some that we asked, we requested that, but even you may think that I didn't answer that quite with the full degree that I could have. Please feel free to submit those answers to our committee, and we will see that that gets into the report if it's deemed the information that we would use. But thank you for your attendance. We're now adjourned.